I was brought up in a Christian home, Kitchener-Waterloo area. Uh, my father was deeply involved at the United Church in Waterloo. He was treasurer there for 20 years. So I grew up in a Christian influence. When I was a young and tender age and learning more about what it's to be like to belong to a Christian church, I had great struggles, particularly with this thing called the Trinity, which made absolutely no sense to me in my teenage years. I did talk to some people about it. I got the impression that I wasn't alone in that. And it kept me from joining in some sessions with other young people who were very fundamental. I had this sense of, well, I really don't accept this all 100%, so how can I participate, for instance, in a Bible study when I'm really not sold on the product? However, I did recognize very early in life that there is a spiritual part in each of us. I'll be very personal about this. I have a spiritual place within me that must be listened to and fulfilled to give me a completeness in my life. So that was a long time search for that. I even looked at other religions to find out what other people do in terms of dealing with this huge question. I had a great fear of the unknown and the mystery around faith. That slowed me down for a long period in my life. I didn't have the courage to really stand up and say, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. But then somewhere along the way, through life experiences, I remember one day turning over in bed saying to God, I can't do this alone anymore. That's it. I'm done. I can't do it alone anymore. And when that switch got switched on, things changed. I was given the courage to doubt, which it turned out to be a fairly decent thing to do. I also learned that in terms of Bible study and so on, that mythology is a very, very large part of it. And I'm not going to go into that in great depth, but it enabled me to see more clearly what the messages that were being given to us were. So, and to keep it simple, what I boiled it down to personally in terms of the biblical message is that it's really all about love and all the facets that go around that. And I'm okay with that. At this point in life, I feel God's presence within 24 hours a day. I don't pray on preset times, but I am constantly, when I'm awake, in touch and have a sense of God's presence within me. And I'm very, very thankful for that. A lot of that has come, by the way, through interaction with other people, whether it be Christians or whatever other faith groups I've talked to. So in essence, in summary, that's about it for now, and I'm at peace.
Thank you for your honesty, Bob. It's so helpful to know that even though this faith thing is a hard thing to figure out sometimes, we can still find peace. Next, Ruth is going to tell us a story about how she was led very specifically to pray.
One of the things I love about the Holy Spirit is that He came to be our helper, our advocate, our paraclete. And I have a memory from a few years ago, maybe about 6 years ago, when I was in my country of birth, and I was living in the capital city of Nairobi, and I woke up one morning, had my devotions and was getting ready for my day. So I was sitting down to have my breakfast and I was drinking my tea. And all of a sudden I had a very strong impression to stop and go and pray. So it came very urgently, and sometimes the Holy Spirit is very disruptive. So I heard very clearly. So I thought, okay, I will go and pray. I'll just quickly finish my breakfast and go and pray. And as I lifted my cup to my lips, I heard now. And so I knew if the Holy Spirit doesn't joke with matters like that. So I just left my breakfast and went to my room and started praying. My father had been ailing for some time, so I thought naturally it's probably my parents. So I started to pray. For my mother. Then I switched to my father because I thought, okay, he might need the prayer more. But as soon as I switched to my father, I found myself switching back to my mother, and it's almost like I couldn't take control of my focus, and it just rested on my mother, until, and then okay, at the end, I felt like a release, and I knew that God had done something. He had got me to pray. Because I prayed in my understanding, I prayed in the Spirit, and I just let the Holy Spirit lead. So when I felt the release that something had shifted, I thanked God for the peace and thanked Him for answering the prayers, and I went back to my daily activities. Now, a few hours later is when I learned what that was all about. My sister called and said, "You won't believe what has happened," and just asking her about, what happened and what time did this happen. I was just amazed at the Holy Spirit, because exactly the time that I had started to pray, something was happening with my parents back home on their farm. So my sister told me that when they were having their breakfast, after having their breakfast, rather, my father left in his car to go down to the city, which is about 15 kilometers away, to buy some materials that he needed. And usually when he went, he was away for like 2 or 3 hours at a stretch before he came back home. So he had just left, and my sister was talking to my mother when she noticed all of a sudden my mother started to slur her words and started to look like she was going to fall down, like crumble and slump. So like she was just about to fall asleep and very unsteady. And so my sister was shocked, because she knew something was really wrong, but she just in her spirit just felt led by the Spirit to like make sure that she doesn't sleep or fall asleep. So she kept like slapping my mom on the cheeks and talking to her and keeping her upright in her chair. And meanwhile, she was like thinking, what do I do? She didn't know what to do. And when she looked up through the window, just thinking, who could she send one of the workers to run to a neighbor to get a car to come and take my mother to hospital, because something was really wrong. And the neighbors were far away, and most of them usually had gone, and it wasn't guaranteed that she would get the car that she wanted. So she was really in a panic, just praying also in her heart, like, for help. And when she looked up through the window, what does she see? My father apparently had forgotten something, so he'd done a U-turn and come back all the way to the house. So he arrived just at the time that my mother had slumped into the chair, and my sister was trying to keep her awake. So when my father came in, they, called out, they called some of the workers, got my mother into the car and drove her to the hospital. And so they stayed with her while she went into emergency. And so the report was my mother had a minor heart attack, and the doctor said that if they hadn't taken her when they did, she wouldn't even have been alive. So I really thank the Holy Spirit that we can call upon Him, and if we rely on Him and wait on Him, we know He's going to come through for us. If we make Him welcome in our hearts and in our lives and in our daily affairs, He will always come through. And so I just thank and bless God for this season of Pentecost and for all that the Holy Spirit has come into our lives to do.